So in this segment, we will be having a discussion on gender equality. So affirmative action is basically a doctrine that states that members of so-called minority groups have equal rights to hold positions in any area of society in preference to white heterosexual males. So I have 4 questions. So I would like to open a discussion about the benefits and the consequences of affirmative action. So maybe let's start first by clarifying the concept of affirmative action. So about 30 seconds apiece, yeah?
They have the right to have any place in office, provided they have the skill sets to match to go with that. That I agree with, yes, for sure.
So what's affirmative action?
Well, it's just, I think it's been misconstrued a little bit. I think that you're saying that affirmative action means that we need to have minorities on the panel or on the board or part of that establishment. And that's fine, but as long as they're qualified to do so. And I think that what everyone's thinking is affirmative action means that these people are not qualified to be on the board or part of that establishment because they're there only because of the fact that they're a minority. Is that correct? Okay, thanks. That's my thought.
Well, affirmative action, why should we hire people based on their gender rather than their merit? I think that being a woman or being a minority is not a disability. It's not disadvantaging you. There are some biases, of course, against any sort of social group or gender, but everyone's in a level playing field, so why should we have to start... It actually devalues the women minority groups and makes them sort of tokens, like we have to hire them because they are women or because they're black. It's like, why not hire them because they have a good resume or good skills?
Just thought I'd point out, women are not minority. They're the other half of the population.
Exactly. It's
they're not minority.
50-50. So,
so I understand that when you're saying that.
Why are women looked down on as being disadvantaged?
Minority group, can I interject? But minority groups often has a negative connotation. Mm-hmm. These groups are weak and they're defenceless and they are negative at some level of discourse. The truth of that is absolutely open to debate, but I think the discussions become stratified in them and those. That is already an issue in the way it's being discussed.
Them against the world, right? Like,
yeah.
There's an oppressor and there's the oppressed. It's trying to push that agenda, right?
Yeah, and the discussions have become too simplified about our relationships.
It goes both ways, a bit of push and pull.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Fair enough.
Hey, Greg, so what's affirmative action?
Affirmative action, I'm thinking towards, for example, a male wanting to join a female gym. How would this affirmative action come about? Would there be some type of tests with regards to the hormonal side of things? And we could move on to not only that side of things, but also sport. For example, females in sport with regards to males with females with hormones leaning towards more the male gender. And affirmative action may very well be necessary to occur to bring a line between the male and the female.
Okay, no one actually really gave a definition for affirmative action, so I'm glad I actually gave mine. So let's now, so how are minority groups defined?
How are they defined? Are they defined as being disadvantaged?
How do you define a minority group?
The group that's not the dominant group in society. So I'd say Australia is a white country, so anyone that's not white is a minority by that definition. Because
can you give me a list of minority groups?
Aboriginals, Asians, Indians, Africans, anyone that's not Caucasian in Australia would...
So apart from race, anything else?
Probably religion. Religion would be very important with regards to minority groups. And if we go back to the census, if you saw the results of the census, you would, for example, Muslims are certainly a minority group with regards to religion.
So why do they have a majority of power in political... Where's the fairness in that? Why is there a... So, okay, minority groups should, if they're by definition the lesser number of a group, then that they should only have that portion of influence within the whole of the group. Would that be fair?
I think the question that I've got there is that I think affirmative action is intended to give them a greater voice than they would otherwise have. They might not have sufficient power to break through the dominant discourse so that they get a place.
So why would we give them that?
Well, that is a political decision.
Yeah, so
and are we capable of dealing with that?
I think it comes back to almost cunning. For example, if you look at the different groups, you might find where, we're talking about Muslims again, they congregate in one area and therefore they get an alderman on a council and then they all vote in one area and then they get somebody in parliament in the state arena. And by joining together, it's all about cunning, it's all about thinking about how they can accumulate all their knowledge and use their power as well.
But that's okay, but they're still a minority.
That's certainly
Do you think
So let me say something here. So we think in terms of Australia, a group, say like Muslims could be a minority, but when you actually go global, let's go global. Where is affirmative action practiced in the world? Is it practiced in South Africa, in Kenya, in Egypt,
It's only
in Brazil?
practiced in Western countries.
Only Western countries. Why is that?
Isn't that interesting? Because those minorities which to infiltrate.
I have an idea about that. I was reading an article the other day about communities, and that there is an assumption that communities are weak and harmless and they're nice and they need help. And it's an assumption, because there's nothing to suggest that communities are that. Communities are extremely diverse. That's where the appropriate use of the term diverse is. They're all very, very different. And you cannot, in a blanket statement, go, all minority communities need help, they need information. I think it needs a far more differentiated view, and I'm not really sure whether from the top that you can look at that. It's really an opening up, I think, of discourse.
So I think that the people that have said affirmative action, which means to give the minorities a bigger voice, are the far left. Because in giving the minorities a bigger voice, that makes it disproportionate to the way the country should be, or the corporation should be, and if it's disproportionate, it's never going to be fair, is it? If the minority group has a bigger voice than the majority, how is that fair?
It's about what is this group needing to achieve, and is there a real issue there?
The percentage of their voice should only be a percentage of their existence.
Yeah.
So what's the intent? What's the intention behind affirmative action?
I think to destroy the group. That's what affirmative action does. The main group. So if a minority is going to have a bigger power than the majority, all that's going to happen is create discourse, great word, within that corporation. And the result of that, they're going to fall apart. They're going to fight, argue. There's going to be a lot of disproportionate communication and attacking each other.
I think there's a fear whether it's toxic or good for us, and I think the toxicity or the potential.
Yeah, it's toxic.
I think it all comes back to the word power. How they accumulate their power to bring forth changes in their community that they wish for, and it all comes back to power. The cunning of the accumulation, as we spoke before, about groups living in one area. For example, if every Aboriginal lived in one particular state, in one particular area, they'd have so much more representation in the various government departments.
And in that state.
Exactly, yeah. But because...
Which would be fair. Do you think?
Well, that's a matter of opinion, of course.
Okay.
It would bring about a certain power in that one area, but maybe the diversity of spreading it around equals...
Dilutes it.
Dilutes it, yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So, in other words, within that corporation, state, whatever we want to call it, the balance of power should be proportionate to the population. Would that be fair to state?
That's a very fair state.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess affirmative action is saying, well, let's give more power to the minorities. The result of that is it disbalances the corporation.
Well, that would be one way to look at it. The other suggestion would be that it will bring power to those minorities which they don't have now, which would bring forth certain changes in them.
Why would you give them those powers and create those changes? is that to our betterment, or is it causing an issue?
I think this is where it comes back to diversity, where if we give these lesser bodies a bigger speaking area, we would certainly learn from their knowledge.
So to finish wind up the conversation, because that was my last question. So let's wind up. So yes or no. So is there strength or weakness in diversity for Australia?
I'm suggesting strength.
There is strength in diversity when that diversity is coming together. I can look at Star Trek and talk about this particular group of race of beings called the Borg, and they swallow up every other race to become part of their community. The result of that is that these Borgs have become one of the most powerful beings in the universe.
Yeah.
So whilst there is diversity, the tension of that diversity is to become part of it, to strengthen a group, not to weaken it. And I think some people view diversity as a way of weakening the group. And I think the leftists do a great job of trying to weaken the group.
Thank you.